As we come to the end of the May 23 essay session, I thought it would be useful for us to have a reflection on what we've learned from this session. Hi guys, welcome to ToK Today. As usual, I'm very grateful for likes and very grateful for subscriptions. So I've been helping students from all around the world with their ToK essays. And this has been an interesting experience for me because it's the first time I've been helping students who are not in my own school or who are not in my class. And therefore, I don't know what these students have been taught, what the emphasis of their teacher was, what sort of reference points they've been given. The whole process of teaching them ToK is alien to me. So they bring new understandings to me of ToK, and I have to adjust my advice accordingly. So this video is partly a consolidation of learning for me, and hopefully it'll be useful for other ToK teachers and for ToK students if you're about to start the essay process. So what are the main learning points? Well, let's start with number one, building or creating the knowledge arguments. A major problem for many of the students that I worked with was that they didn't have the skills or the knowledge to build or create or write knowledge arguments. And this has three main consequences or three main problems created from this. Number one is definitions. Number two is writing claims or counterclaims. And number three is identifying appropriate RLS or real life situations. These three problems come from not having the skills to build or to write a good knowledge argument. Let's go through each of these problems in a bit more detail. So first of all, definitions. In this session, we wrangled with definitions like things like what cannot be explained and what are bubbles and what's meant by replicability. Now, obviously, students shouldn't be using dictionary definitions, but some of them still were, and that presented a whole set of problems in itself. And if the definitions are not correct at the beginning, then it makes it very difficult to write the claims and counterclaims later on. Sometimes just defining those terms is the basis of the whole essay itself. So if you haven't really thought through your main knowledge argument, it's very difficult to come up with those definitions. And equally, it's difficult to come up with those definitions if you haven't also worked out the knowledge argument. There's a sort of mutually reciprocal relationship between the knowledge argument and the definitions. They sort of feed into each other. And whilst I'm mentioning definitions, I'd just like to mention some of the problems that we had where students are rewriting the key terms or the key ideas in the prescribed title. And I don't mean redefining them, I mean rewriting them or misinterpreting them. The classic one that I came across is in the essay about what can and cannot be explained. And a lot of students had rewritten what cannot be explained to be has not been explained. And there's a difference between what cannot be explained and what has not been explained. And I think that difference might actually be one of the ways of tackling that essay. It might be one of the keys of that essay. So if you haven't identified there's that difference between the two definitions, then you're going to struggle with the essay. The second problem which comes from not being able to build a knowledge argument is the problem of writing claims or counterclaims. So I often got questions like, I can't think of a counterclaim for what cannot be explained, or I can't think of a counterclaim for replicability is not important in AOK, natural sciences, that type of thing. And I think that quite a lot of students showed quite rigid thinking or a lack of flexibility in thinking when they're trying to develop their claims and particularly their counterclaims. They didn't seem to have that sort of lateral approach to think around the title to come up with counterclaims. Some of them didn't know that the counterclaim doesn't have to be the direct opposite of the claim, but can be a variation of the claim. All the essay command terms we discuss, and that means that you can look at various perspectives, that you should be looking at various perspectives. So this made me think about the importance of debate in my own ToK classroom and really focusing more on student debate and maybe even going back to Edward de Bono's thinking caps just to give them different ways of approaching a question or a key idea. Obviously, the problem of writing claims or counterclaims could also stem from not having very good definitions at the beginning. If you have a dictionary definition at the beginning of a key term, then it's going to be difficult to write claims or counterclaims which pertain to ToK about that later on. So those definitions are key. So let's move on to the third issue, which was problems of identifying RLS. Problems of coming up with appropriate real-life situations to exemplify the knowledge arguments. And I'd often get this question, is this a good RLS for X, or is this a good RLS for Y? And obviously, if you haven't really thought through the claim or the counterclaim, or you haven't really thought through the definition, then you're going to find it difficult to identify the RLSs. Now, in ToK Wonderland, where everyone should be, we're meant to look at the world around us, and the RLSs are then meant to give rise to the knowledge arguments. You're meant to sort of see ToK coming out of the empirical world around you. In reality, I think most people sort of build the ToK and then try to find RLSs which fit with the ToK. Now, I have a simple rule that virtually any RLS at all can be used for virtually any claim or counterclaim. It's not in the RLS, it's in the argument which is made about that RLS. So you can use any RLS for virtually any claim or counterclaim. Okay, you can even use the same RLS for both a claim and a counterclaim. And if you do that well and build that argument well, then it shows nuance in understanding. It shows perspectives in being able to understand the knowledge. I'm thinking of making a future video where I'll randomly select RLSs and randomly select claims and show that you can fit any RLS to any claim at all, or counterclaim. That's one for later. Okay, let's move on to the second reflection point. And that's on question choice, the questions that the students are choosing to look at, the PT that the students are choosing to look at. I think that question number 6 on methodology was by far the easiest PT on this year's, on May 23 PTs. And then I think PT number 1 on replicability was probably the second easiest PT this year. I'm not going to go into why I think they're the easiest. I've done that in another video, in an earlier video, which I'll leave in a card up here. From all of the data points that I have, I think that essay number 6 is the least popular essay that students are choosing to take. So they're not taking the one that I think is the easiest. And from what I can tell, I think that essay number 5 is probably the most popular. That's the one about visual representations. It's not the hardest essay, but it's certainly not as straightforward as essay number 6 and essay number 1. Now, I don't think that we should be telling students which essay to do, all right? But if anyone has any bright ideas about how we can sort of communicate that some essays are a lot more straightforward than other essays, and essay number 6 and essay number 1, they have really straightforward structures. So they might want to consider them as being gifts from the examiner to the students. Yeah, I know we want students to choose according to their interests, and we want them to choose according to their authentic reflections. Some students seem to be drawn to the really complicated essays, and then we sort of have to pick up the pieces later on. Frustrating. I'm not sure how we get around that one. Okay, let's move on to reflection number 3. Use of the 12 ToK concepts. I'm just not seeing them very much. I'm not seeing them intentionally, explicitly being put into the essays. I think if students do use them intentionally, then it helps them to focus on knowledge issues and knowledge questions and to stay away from talking a lot about the RLS. Now, obviously all 12 ToK concepts could be applied in any essay. And we need more focus on that. So what I usually do is I ask the students to identify 2, maybe 3 concepts that they're going to sort of showcase in the essay. It doesn't mean that they write solely about those concepts. Obviously, usual sort of structure of claims and counterclaims and RLSs and all of that. But where there's opportunity to bring out their 2 or 3 showcased concepts, bring them out, put focus on them, it places more emphasis on knowledge issues and it gives more focus in the essay. So ToK 12 concepts are really good things to showcase. Let's move on to reflection number 4. Reflection number 4 is questioning the title for evaluation points. Some students didn't seem to realise that you can actually sort of question the assumptions within the title to draw out good evaluation points. I think the best example of this is the essay on can and cannot be explained. And some students didn't realise that there's an assumption there that some knowledge can be explained and some knowledge cannot be explained. And they could actually challenge that and say, well, you know, some knowledge can be explained in some contexts, but not in other contexts. That can and cannot be explained are not stable and consistent categories, and that knowledge can change between those 2 categories. And that sometimes as new knowledge comes in, something can move from the can be explained category into the cannot be explained category. So it's that sort of challenging the title a bit to draw out evaluation points, which I'm going to highlight with my own students. You might want to highlight with yours. Let's move on to reflection number 5. Okay, reflection number 5, very topical, is the use of AI, particularly ChatGPT. And I did see some content which clearly had been generated by AI. When I asked the students about this, they were fairly honest and they said, yeah, that's come from AI. Now, it's quite easy to spot the stuff that comes from AI at the moment because it tends to have these sort of big, sweeping, general introductory sections, and then it also tends to sort of talk in vague generalizations with lots of hedging terms, and it's just not able to be sort of precise in about knowledge arguments in a way that ToK requires you to be. It may get better in the future, but at the moment it can't. So to use it to get good ToK content, you have to frame the prompts really, really well. In fact, you have to understand the essay and understand your own knowledge arguments so well that it's more work to get the ChatGPT AI to do the work for you than for you just to write it yourself. I hope you understand what I mean here, that you have to have a better understanding of the essay to get ChatGPT to write it than is required for you to write it yourself. It's sort of like being a ToK teacher as opposed to being a ToK student, because you're having to explain to ChatGPT what you require from it. So I don't have huge fears about AI at the moment. We'll need to adapt our assessment system so that it takes account of AI, because AI is not going away. And it could end up being a really valuable and useful tool for us. We just have to get our heads around that at some point. Okay, and now we come to the final reflection point, and the final reflection point, number 6, is no great surprise for anybody who's been doing the ToK essay for a few years, and that's the continued reliance or description of RLS. I saw just so much content that described the RLS in detail. And I mean, this has always happened from eons in time, from the birth of ToK. And I'm not really sure how we get around it. I've sort of spoken to students endlessly about it. I've made videos endlessly about it, and so on and so on. Now, the recent subject report, May 22, I think said that most of the essays were actually focused on knowledge issues rather than RLS. So that means that teachers are doing a really good job of cutting out all that descriptive RLS content at the draft stage. Well done, teachers. If you're a ToK student and you're watching this and you're worried about this, then pick up my book, the How to Write the ToK Essay in 6 Easy Steps from toktoday.com, and that will really help you to cut out all RLS content. It's got some worked examples of RLS heavy passages and then transformed into knowledge specific passages and so on and so on. So that's it, my 6 reflections on the May 23 session. I've done some good learning through working through that session. I hope that this video is useful for you. I'm looking forward to putting that learning into effect with the November 23 essays, which come out in the next few days. If you found this video useful, or you liked it, or you're just feeling generous today, then a subscribe or a like would be greatly appreciated. All that's left for me to say is to wish you a great day, stay ToKtastic, and goodbye.